In this demonstration, I'll be talking about how to install CloudWatch agent into an EC2 instance and send logs over into CloudWatch Logs. To do that, the first step we need to do is to install the CloudWatch agent using the command yum install AWS logs. So we'll quickly do that. Sudo yum install AWS logs. So before you can start this process, you need to create an EC2 instance, which we've already created. And you need to make sure that the instance has the appropriate IAM role that gives it access to be able to send logs over to CloudWatch Logs. So let's install AWS Logs, and okay, AWS Logs has been installed successfully. The next stage for us is to configure the IAM role that we're going to attach into the EC2 instance, which will give the instance access to be able to write into CloudWatch Logs. So let's go over into IAM to configure that. So go into Identity and Access Management, under Security. So the first thing for us to do here is to create the policy, which is going to be under the role, and there's the role that gets attached into the EC2 instance. So let's go to the policies, we click on policies, and we create a new policy that will give us access to be able to create a role for the EC2 instance. To create the policy, we click on the create policy button right here, and gives us the wizard to choose the service and all that. But we actually have the JSON format for the authorization we need to give to the policy. So we'll go with the JSON option and paste our JSON statement here that will authorize the EC2 instance to be able to use to be able to push logs into CloudWatch. So we paste our policy here as we have it in the chapter in the book, and we'll click on next to give it a name. And if you don't need to tag it, actually this is more of the tagging, not the naming, and you click on next to review, and then we give it a name. So we're going to give our policy a name that will help us to remember the policy. The name of the policy will be EC2 CloudWatch policy. The description can be left blank, and then we click on create policy. So you can actually create a role before a policy or a policy before the role. It doesn't really matter which one of them you create first, but you need to ensure that that policy gets attached into the role, and that role is what gets attached into the EC2 instance. Now let's go over and create the role for this policy. So we click on roles, and we click the button here, create role, to create the role. So the first thing it's going to ask us is what is the trusted entity for the role we're trying to create. We're actually given the permission to the EC2 instance. So the EC2 instance is the trusted entity in this case. So the common use case is EC2 Lambda. So for our example, for this demonstration, we'll be looking at EC2 as the option, and then we'll click on next for the permission, and it's going to ask us for the permission. So all we need to do here is to type the name of the EC2 the policy we already created. So EC2 CloudWatch policy, which we have here. This is the policy we already created. If we don't have a policy created, you can always click on the create policy button. That will take us into the wizard which we just came from to create the policy all over again. But what we did here is to create a policy, and then we created the role, and we can attach the policy into the role. So we click on this to add this policy, and then we click on next. So next is the tags, which is pretty much optional. We click on next, where we review and put the name of the role. The name of the role becomes EC2 CloudWatch role. The description can be left the way it is. It's pretty much optional, and then we click on create role. So this will create the role that we can eventually attach to our EC2 instance that gives it access to write into CloudWatch Logs. Let's head over into EC2 and attach the role on the EC2 instance that we just installed the CloudWatch agent in. So we head over to services, and we go to EC2. Under EC2, we click on instances, and we should be able to find our instance right here, and we click on, select the instance, we go over into actions, and under actions we go to security. Under security, we can see the option here that says modify IAM role, so we click on that, and here we can add attach the IAM role to the EC2 instance. So we need to click on choose IAM role and type the name of the role, and the name of our role is EC2 CloudWatch role, and we can find it right here. So we click on this and we click on save. So this will attach the role we just created to the EC2 instance that we have running, and this instance have the AWS CloudWatch Logs, CloudWatch agents installed in it. So the next step for us is to configure CloudWatch Logs to be able to push logs from the EC2 instance into CloudWatch Logs. The next step here is to configure the CloudWatch agent that we already installed. So to configure the CloudWatch agent, we go to the place where the configuration file exists, and it's under cd cd/etc/AWS logs. Okay, and in this directory we're going to find awscli.conf, awslogs.conf, and then the config directory. The configuration actually exists in the awslogs.conf file. So we open the awslogs.conf file with our favorite editor. So sudo vim awslogs.conf. So opening this file is going to show us a lot of configurations and instructions that helps us to understand how to configure the configuration, the CloudWatch Logs agent to send logs into CloudWatch, and the different changes and different parameters that can be changed. So we have the state file, and we have a bunch of configurations, but if we scroll down to the bottom, we're going to find an existing configuration already here with some very interesting parameters, such as the date time format, the file we want to pick logs from and write into CloudWatch, the buffer duration, which is what is the frequency at which it will take files and data from the file, and then the log stream name, which is the stream in CloudWatch where the logs will be written to, the initial position, which is where CloudWatch agent will read from, starting from in the file, and then the log group name, which is of course the grouping of the different log streams and the groupings where it will stay. So basically we are going to be working with this configuration to ensure that we're able to send logs over into CloudWatch Logs. So for our demonstration, we want to be able to pick log files from a different location from what is here. So we'll be making some basic configuration changes to this. So our log group name, we want to call it a different name from this and call it server logs. Okay, that's our log group name. The log stream name, which is the instance ID, it's a parameter, so it makes it easy for us to know which particular instance these logs are coming from. So we'll leave that the way it is. The initial position is the start of the file, which means it's going to start reading the logs from the beginning of the file. The next directory where we want to pick this logs or data from is from the secure directory. So we'll edit this to var log secure. Okay. So it's going to be reading this directory for activities that come in there, and any kind of login activity that come into the system, okay, into the Linux operating system. The CloudWatch agents will pick that information and write it over into CloudWatch Logs. So it's easy for us to see the activities that are going on in it. So we can also name this category of configuration. We can call it application logs. So just a way of labeling it for easy identification. You could have different groupings that are picking different information, so it's good that they are properly labeled for what they do. So when we review the configuration and we are sure everything is fine, we have the date time format, which shows us the date and time format. The documentation for this is up here, that tells you what each of this B, D, H, M, and S, what they mean individually. So when we are done with that, the next thing we can do is to save our changes and then start off the AWS log. So how do we start the AWS log? So we do sudo service AWS logs start. Okay, it's starting the AWS logs now, and I think that means that it has started successfully. So let's just verify that it's actually running. So we do sudo service AWS logs status. Okay, it shows us that AWS logs is running. So what this means is that it's going to pick logs from the var secure directory and write them over into a particular log stream and log group in CloudWatch Logs. So what we're basically going to do is to give it a couple of minutes, and we'll get into CloudWatch Log console and see the logs that have been written over into CloudWatch Logs. Now we are at the CloudWatch management console page. So let's quickly head over into CloudWatch Logs. Under logs, we have log groups. So let's click on log groups. And under log groups, we should be able to find the log group we just created right here. Yeah, that's it, server logs. And click on server logs. I'm going to find the log stream here, which we use the instance ID. And when I click on the log stream, it's going to show me all the logs that was in that file. So you can see the logs that are being written here from that file over into CloudWatch Logs. So this is a very basic demonstration of how to, configure CloudWatch Logs to write logs, CloudWatch Log agents to write logs from your EC2 instance into the CloudWatch log groups and log streams in your CloudWatch console. Thank you. In this demonstration, I'll be showing how to create a metric filter from the logs that we already created. In the previous section, we created a group of logs coming from an EC2 instance inside CloudWatch, and we'll be working with that same log groups that we already created. So let's go into server logs, which is the log group, and under that log groups, we have a log stream here, which is the instance ID of the EC2 instance where the logs are coming from. So we click on the log stream, and before we can create a metric filter, we need to decide what we are going to use to filter out the metric. So for example, one of the basic things you can always check with your logs is to check for invalid login credentials. That shows that users are trying to log into the EC2 instance with wrong credentials. So we can see a bunch of invalid user. So let's assume we want to be able to know when users are trying to, do DDoS attacks or SSH into our instance with unauthorized credentials and unauthorized access. Okay, so what we need to do here is to type the word we need to look for within the bunch of logs, and from there we are able to get the filter that we're filtering through and create a metric filter for that. So for this scenario, we'll be using the invalid as the word we are looking for. So invalid means that the user tried to log in with an invalid user into our EC2 instance. So we type the word and hit the enter key to search. And when we search, we're going to find a bunch of invalid words here. So what the metric filter will do for us is that it's able to always check within the logs that we have, because we're looking at hundreds to thousands and millions of rows of logs, and filter out if there is any log called with a value called invalid existing within it. If it does, then it will flag an error. We can configure a CloudWatch alarm for that. So that's the job of the metric filter. So we'll be creating a metric filter right now. Now that we have inputted the search and pressed enter, we can see the metric filter, create metric filter button becomes active, but it wasn't active before because metric filter needs to get a keyword where it's going to search our logs for. So we click on create metric filter, and we need to type the name of the filter that we want to create. So for this scenario, we'll be calling our metric filter invalid user filter. So invalid user filter, and then the namespace. So metrics are grouped by namespaces. Okay, so we need to give the metric a namespace name. Okay, so for this we'll be calling it server metrics, and the name of the metric, which is invalid user. Okay, and the metric value. So at what value are we going to be evaluating the number of what we find. So metric value is the value published to the metric name when a filter pattern occurs. So it's going to filter with that, and what is the count for a filter, and we'll start with 1. So for every filter it finds, it's a 1, it's a 1, it's a 1. And with that we can eventually create our metric filter. We also have a default value option which we can make 0. So it said the default value is published to the metric when the pattern does not match. If you leave this blank, no value is published. So let's make it 0. So if the filter for invalid user does not match, it gives us 0. But if it matches, it gives us 1. So with that, we can count the number of invalid users we have in our metric, in our logs within a specific period of time. So when we're done with that, we click on the create button here to create the metric filter. It's going to take a couple of seconds, and the metric filter has been created successfully.